So, guys, let us discuss the Indian Partnership Act 1932. The important sections are already highlighted for you. In case you are not able to remember, not able to memorize all the section numbers, at least memorize the sections which I have highlighted. Okay. So the sections which are highlighted, these numbers are very important for exam. They're very frequently asked in the exam. So at least memorize these section numbers. Let us discuss Unit 1 of the Partnership Act from my concept book. Now, this is a total exam oriented revision. So, I will also tell you the sections which are important for exam, the things that you need to memorize, what kind of questions can be asked on this particular act. So, you will get a mix of theory as well as case based questions. Is it important for you to learn the definition of partnership? Yes. When will you use it? The definition of partnership will be written only when a question is asked on the essential elements of partnership. You need not write the definition in any other case. Only when a question is asked on what are the essential elements of a valid partnership, only then you will start the answer by writing the definition. And it is important for you to write the definition with the section number because that is the expectation of the institute. They want you to quote the section number also. You need to write the definition as it is. It's a definition. You cannot write it in your own words. Now, what is the definition of partnership? As per Section 4 of the Indian Partnership Act 1932, so you will also start your answer. You will also start the definition in this manner. As per Section 4 of the Indian Partnership Act 1932, partnership is defined as it is the relationship between persons who have agreed to share the profits of the business carried on by all or any one of them acting for all. If you are confused as to what are the essential elements of partnership, I am not able to recall the head points. Are head points important for exam? Yes, you need to start your answer with these head points. Okay, so each and every element will have to be explained by writing the head point. So you will write the head point, underline it, and start the explanation from the next sentence. Okay. So if you are unable to recall the essential elements, then use the definition because all the essential elements are hidden in the definition itself. So what is a partnership? It is a relation between persons. So you need persons who have agreed. So it means there will be a partnership agreement that is known as a partnership deed. They will share the profits of the business carried on by all or any one of them acting for. Also, there is sharing of profits. Sharing of profit will also include sharing of loss. In what ratio? Profit sharing ratio. If nothing is specified, then equally of the business. So there is a business because you cannot carry on non-profit business or a charitable business in partnership. So yes, you need persons, you need certain agreement, there is sharing of profit, there is business. Now this business is carried on by all or any one of them acting for all. This is the element of mutual agency. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements from here. Also, you need to write that there should be sharing of the profits. Sharing will be, that is one of the essential elements of partnership. Is if one partner keeps the entire profit, then that is not partnership. Okay, so from the definition only, you will be able to identify the essential elements. So do you need to learn all this? No, this is not important for exam. But what are the essential elements of partnership? So the first essential element is that there has to be a contract because it is a relationship. Okay, it's the result of a contract. We know that it is known as a partnership deed. But yes, law is very clear. They say that it is that unlike your HUF, which is created by status, by birth in the family, your partnership does not arise from status or by operation of law or inheritance. A partner dies, automatically his son will not become the partner unless it is mentioned in the deed. So by law, you will not become a partner. It does not arise from status or operation of law or inheritance. You have to come together. You have to form into an agreement. You need two or more persons. So minimum two, maximum also. There is a limit, but that limit was never given in the Partnership Act. That limit was always given in the Companies Act. Section 464 of the Companies Act specifies the maximum number of partners. So law says that you need minimum two or more persons to form a partnership. The word person is mentioned over here. It means it includes individual as well as artificial person, that is a body corporate. Even a company can enter into partnership if it is allowed by the memorandum. So you need minimum two or more persons to form partnership, and these persons must be competent to contract. So only a major person of sound mind, person who is not disqualified from contracting, can enter into a valid contract of partnership. I have also mentioned over here that this person may be natural or artificial. If a question is not asked on the essential elements, wherein you are expected to write all the essential elements, there is another type of question which they can ask in the exam, is define partnership, list all the essential elements of partnership and explain any two. So here you will have to write the head points. You will have to list all the essential elements, and you can choose any two elements that you wish to explain in detail. But I always advise my student, choose that element wherein there is a lot of content to write, like two or more persons. There has to be a business. So choose the element where you can write more provisions. But yes, you will also have to frame your answer depending on the marks. If it is a low weightage question, then you need not explain everything in detail. But yes, if it is a 6-mark question, so write the definition, list all the essential elements, and explain the two best ones that you remember. Since partnership is not a separate person in the eyes of law, it cannot enter into partnership with another firm. There cannot be a partnership between two firms because they are not persons in the eyes of law. Can there be a partnership between an individual and a body corporate? Yes, because they are persons in the eyes of law. What is the maximum number of limit? So section 464 gives us the maximum number, which is 50. If you feel that the number of members will increase, it will cross 50, don't wait for it. Immediately get yourself registered as a company, failing which you will become an illegal association, not having any standing in the eyes of law. We will consider as if this kind of organization does not exist. If it does not exist, you will not be able to continue the business. You will not even be able to wind up the business, because there is nothing to wind up. That is what law says. It has become an illegal association. It does not exist for us. So if the association does not exist, there is nothing to even wind up. There must be an agreement. This agreement is known as the partnership deed. This agreement can be oral or it can be in writing. A separate 2-mark question can be asked. Okay, so you can write over here, a 2-mark question can be asked on the contents of the partnership deed. Ma'am, if a question is asked on the contents of partnership deed, what do we need to write? It's only a 2-mark question. Yes, you can write that partnership is the result of an agreement. This agreement may be either in oral or it may be in writing. It may be expressed or it may be implied. Okay. It is, however, desirable that it should be in writing in order to avoid disputes. The document which defines these terms is known as the partnership deed. Do you need to write the definition also? You may write the definition if it is a 3-mark question. If it's a 3-mark question, you may write. If it's a 2-mark question, you can avoid writing the definition, even though you know the definition properly. But time is also important. No, you cannot write the definition and then write everything and sacrifice your time on some other question. So please strategize and write and attempt those questions. Okay. Now, so if it's a 2-mark question, just write this introduction and write the elements or contents of partnership deed. But if it's a 3-mark question, then you can write the definition followed by introduction and contents. Now, I'll tell you a very common mistakes which students make. Students directly start writing the contents of the partnership deed. No, you should never start writing the contents. You should always give a small introduction. Okay, so always give an introduction, write 1 or 2 points of introduction, and then you will list all the contents of partnership deed. Ma'am, but there is also a lot to write. See, this can also be written. Yes, again, it depends on the weightage. If you are asked a 4-mark question, or if you feel that your speed is very good, you will be able to manage the length, then please include these points also. Okay. Time yourself, write as much as you can, but don't leave any question unanswered. Don't utilize half an hour on answering this question just because you know and leave 2 or 3 questions unanswered. Don't do that. So these are the contents of the partnership deed. You already know about them. You need the name of the firm, name of the partners, the address of the partners, name and nature of the business, date of commencement of the partnership, the duration of the partnership, whether it is for a fixed duration or it is at will, the amount of capital contribution, profit sharing ratio, interest, salary, method of valuing the goodwill. In case we need to vary any of these contents, then you need the consent of all the partners. This agreement is what distinguishes partnership from HUF. In HUF, there is no such deed. You become a member just by birth, just by the status in your family. But this agreement is what distinguishes partnership from HUF. HUF arises from status, not any agreement, but partnership is a result of an agreement. There needs to be a proper business. No business, no partnership. You have to be very clear, okay, in your answer. There must exist a business. This is one sentence. No business, no partnership. You can elaborate on this sentence in the exam. There can be no business if there is no partnership. There must exist a proper business to constitute partnership. So it is very much possible to convert these two bullet points into three proper sentences in the exam. Ma'am, do we need to write all this in the exam? Yes, you will be required to write this. A case-based question is generally asked on this. There has to be a business. Business includes every trade, occupation, and profession. Okay. Do we need to write examples if it is asked in the exam? No, examples are not required. But if you feel that the weightage is around 4 to 5 marks and you're not able to write those many points, then you can write one example, not in arrow format, but in sentence format. Since the motive is to acquire gains, to share the gains, this is very important for a case-based question. Since the motive is to acquire gains, any association created for charitable, religious, or social purpose that cannot be regarded as partnership. So this is important for exam. They will give you a business wherein it is just charity. So you will say no, there cannot be any partnership. There must be sharing of profits. Sharing of profit also includes sharing of loss. However, sharing of profit is not a conclusive evidence of the existence of partnership, because we can share profits even with our employees. Sharing of profit is not a conclusive evidence of partnership. If this is not the conclusive evidence of partnership, because you can share your profit with employees also, then what is the true test of partnership? It is nothing but mutual agency. Mutual agency means partner is both principal as well as agent. As a principal, he is bound by the act of other partners, and as an agent, he can bind the other partners by his act. This is the cardinal principle of partnership. Cardinal means it is the most important, that is fundamental principle of partnership. So this is nothing but the true test of partnership, that is mutual agency. Now this is very important because it will help you in small questions. Like, they will give you 2 or 3 situations and they will say, is this a partnership? Identify whether this is a partnership or not. Okay, so you will say that yes, there is sharing of profit, but there is mutual agency also. It is a partnership. There is only sharing of profit, there is no mutual agency. This is not partnership. So small 1 mark question like this, 3 or 4 situations will be given to you. You have to identify whether they are partners or not. So this concept of mutual agency, sharing of profit, these 2 elements will help you to identify whether there is partnership or not. But yes, other elements are also important. 2 persons, sharing of profit, mutual agency. So these are all the elements. But if there is mutual agency, they are partners. If there is no mutual agency, they are not partners. It is as simple as that. Now, this can be asked as a theory question. I had made you write this in the class also, theory question. These are the circumstances wherein you will find that there is sharing of profit, but they are not partners because there is no mutual agency. So in all these cases, you will find sharing of profit, but they are not partners. Okay, so in case of joint owners sharing profits or gross returns, they are joint owners. They are only sharing the benefit of co-ownership. They are not partners. There's no mutual agency. In all these cases, you will not find mutual agency. I am not responsible for act of others. They are not responsible for my act. There is no mutual agency. Therefore, there is no partnership. This again is very important for a case-based question. Students, if you have not written in your textbook that this is important for case-based, this is important for theory, now is the time when you can make those notes. So again, I will tell you whether a question can be asked on this concept as a theory or a case based. If you have not written it in your concept book, please write it right now. So joint owners sharing profits or gross return, money lenders receiving profits. Now they may receive this profit either along with interest or instead of interest. Okay, so X has lent 10 lakh rupees to Y and Y is providing him interest plus 2% of the profit. So there is sharing of profit, I agree, but there is no mutual agency. X is not liable for the action of Y and Z. This is the firm, so Y and Z. So X is not liable for the acts of Y and Z. Y and Z are not responsible for the acts of X. There is no mutual agency. They are not partners. So in all these cases, you have to try and find whether there is mutual agency or not. Your interest along with profit along with interest or profit instead of interest. Okay, servant or agent receiving profit. Servant here means employee. You are sharing profit with your employee. That doesn't mean that he has become our partner. There is no mutual agency. Manager is not responsible for the acts of the firm. The firm is not responsible for the acts of the manager. Manager took loan to buy a house. The firm is not going to repay that loan, no? There is no mutual agency. Yes, there is sharing of profit. But if the manager has taken some loan, he cannot bind the firm. Ma'am, he has taken loan and used it for the firm. But we did not authorize the manager to do that. So, manager is receiving profit sharing, but we are not bound by his acts. He is not bound by the acts of the firm. He is only getting a share of profit for the services that he is providing. He is not a partner. Annuity received by a widow or child of a deceased partner. Annuity means annually some money is received by the widow or child of the deceased partner because we have not settled the deceased partner's account. So here A dies and the firm, the remaining partners, they are sharing profit with the widow of A. Does it mean that the widow has become a partner? Now, if the account is not settled, you will either give the share of profit on whatever amount that is still lying with the firm, or you will give him interest at the rate of 6% per annum or any other rate which is decided by the deed. Here, the account is not settled. So, we are sharing the profit, the money is still lying with the firm. We have an option to either share profits on that amount, whatever is attributable, or you can give interest. But here we are sharing profits with that widow. That doesn't mean that she has become a partner. Seller of goodwill. Yes, sometimes a person who sells his business along with the goodwill, he may get some share in the profits for introducing customers, for helping us establish the business. Just because we are sharing profits, that doesn't mean that he has become our partner. So sharing of profit is not a conclusive evidence of existence of partnership. Then we have the different kinds of partnership, and very important for exam, section 7, partnership at will. Very important for exam, particular partnership and partnership for a fixed period of time. Generally, they ask questions on section 7, that is partnership at will, and particular partnership, that is section 8. Generally, questions are asked on these two sections. Section number is also very, very important. Section 7 and 8 very frequently asked as a theory question. Low weightage, but 2 to 3 marks theory question is asked. Now, what is partnership at will? So, if a question is asked on this, the keywords will actually fetch you good marks. So it is important for you to include all the keywords in your answer. At will means it is my wish. I can continue till whatever date I want. I can dissolve it anytime I want. So partnership at will, it means that the duration is not fixed. In case you have not highlighted these keywords, please do it so right now. So partnership means it is for a fixed period of time. It may continue for an indefinite period till it is wound up, or till any partner dissolves it by giving a notice in writing. So it can be dissolved by any one partner at his will by giving a notice in writing to all the other partners of his intention to dissolve the firm. So they can continue till they wish, till they desire. It is at their will. It can be dissolved by any one partner by giving a notice in writing. Writing is important. You give your intention that I want to retire. Once he retires, automatically the firm will be dissolved unless they have mentioned in the deed that this will not result in dissolution. Partnership for a fixed period of time, over here it is formed for a fixed period of time. It is for a particular period of time. Once the time is over, partnership comes to an end. It comes to an end on the expiry of the fixed period, but I still continue doing the business even after the expiry of this fixed period. So if the business is continued even after the expiry of this term, then it will be treated as if it has become partnership at will. Okay, because you're continuing even after the period is over. What about particular partnership? Particular partnership means a partnership in which it is formed for a specific venture. Once the venture is over, then the partnership comes to an end, but I may dissolve it even before the expiry of this venture. Sometimes it is possible for us to dissolve the partnership even before the time expires. Like, I had formed a partnership with you for 5 years. On the at the end of the first year, I realized that I cannot continue to do business with you. So I want to dissolve the business even before the expiry of that fixed period of 5 years. I can do that. I had formed a partnership with you for a particular venture, but after just 1 year, I realized that we cannot continue to do business. I will not be able to wait till the completion of the venture. So it is possible for you to dissolve the firm, but it requires the mutual consent of all the partners. So this answer, if it is this question, if it is asked in the exam, it all depends on whether you include the keywords or not. You cannot write this answer in your own words. Okay, so if a theory question is asked, you will have to write it as it is. Then we have different kinds of partners like actual partner, active partner, sleeping partner, dormant partner, nominal partner. This is something which you already know. It is easy, so I'm not discussing. Let us go to one very, very important section for case-based question. If you go through my question bank, yes, go through my question bank, you will find many questions on section 28. This is a very frequently asked section in the exam. So students, if a question is asked on section 28, you have to compulsorily write all this as it is given in my book. Please note, you cannot write this in your own words. You cannot say, I have included the keywords. I will sincerely urge you to learn this. Why? See, this is a very frequently asked question in the exam. Mostly marks are allotted to the provisions. So if you write this in your own words, they will feel that the student has not studied even the important sections. Automatically your score will reduce. So please write this as it is. Now, what is the meaning of estoppel? He is not actually a partner, but he is considered just like a partner. He is partner by estoppel. He is either saying, I am a partner, I am a partner. He is representing himself to be a partner, or he is allowing someone to represent him as a partner. When he himself says by his words spoken or written, he is representing himself to be a partner by words spoken or written, or by his conduct. He himself is saying it. That is why it is known as active representation. Or he allows someone else to represent him as a partner. He keeps quiet when the other person introduces him as a partner. He is keeping quiet, then that is known as tacit representation. Law says it may be active, it may be a tacit representation, but if the other person has relied on that and given credit to the firm, relying on the faith of this representation, you have given credit. See, the words here are or. So it may be either an active representation or a tacit, but on the basis of this representation, the other person has given credit. He has acted on it. He has given goods on credit. He has given money on credit. then in that case, the person who has allowed this representation will be considered as if he is a partner. He is considered as partner by estoppel. Ma'am, will he be liable for this transaction? Yes, in case the firm fails to pay, we can recover money from this partner. But will he become partner from now onwards? No. Will he be entitled to the profit that the firm has earned because of this transaction? No, that is not mentioned in the act. He will be liable. We are just trying to protect the third party. So in case the company, again and again I'm saying company only, in case the firm, okay, in case the other partners, they fail to pay, then this partner can also be liable for this transaction because the other person gave credit, gave goods, just thinking that he is a partner. So he is a partner by estoppel. Okay, so this is very important for exam. The next most important part is section 30. If you see the study material, you will not find section 30 in the first unit. Okay, there they have covered it, I think, in the second unit. But I have covered this in the first unit because we are discussing types of partners. So I thought that can minor become a partner should actually be discussed here. But in the study material, you will find it in the second unit along with the other sections. Okay, so they have gone section wise. Over here, I have taken the liberty of moving it over here. Okay, now what kind of questions can be asked? 90% of the times they ask a theory question. The framing may be of a case-based question, but actually they expect you to write the theory only. Okay, so it may seem as if it's a case-based, but they are expecting you to write the theory, or it will be a simple theory question. Now, what kind of question is asked? Sometimes they ask a question on what are the rights and liabilities before and after attaining majority. Or sometimes they ask what are the rights and liabilities before attaining majority or after attaining. Sometimes they ask it together, sometimes they ask it separately. If they ask it together, it will be for around 5 to 6 mark question, can go to 7 marks also. But if they say, can a minor become a partner, what are his rights and liabilities before attaining majority, then it will be a 4-marker question. Ma'am, they have only asked the rights and liabilities before attaining majority. But is it okay if I also write rights and liabilities after attaining majority, even though it is not asked in the question? You are not going to get any extra marks for that, but you will end up wasting time. So don't say, mujhe to aata hai, I have studied, I will write even after attaining majority. Have they asked it in the question? No. Then don't waste time. Don't write. Even if you know, don't write. Okay, so if a question is asked on what are the rights and liabilities before and after attaining majority, you need to first write a small introduction. Yes. So we had discussed that by default, minor cannot become a partner because partnership is the result of an agreement and minor cannot enter into an agreement. Any agreement with minor is void ab initio, Mohri Bibi versus Dharmodas Ghosh. However, a person, a minor, may be admitted as a partner only with the consent of all the partners, and he must be admitted only for the benefits of the firm. Okay, so with the consent of all the partners, I will highlight it over here. There must exist a partnership because you cannot admit a partnership in a new firm. You cannot even form a partnership with a minor. But minor can be admitted with the mutual consent of all the partners, and he can be admitted only to the benefits of the partnership. It means that minor will only share the profits but not the losses. But I feel that is a very incorrect statement. He does share the losses, but he is not personally liable. He has a limited liability. His liability is limited to the amount of his share in the profit and property. What are the rights and liabilities before attaining majority? Okay, so minor is entitled to share in the profits and property of the firm as may be agreed upon. These are the key points. You have to write these keywords in the exam. So he is entitled to the profit and property of the firm as may be agreed upon. He has the right to access, inspect, take copies of the books of accounts of the firm, but he does not have any right as far as other books are concerned because they may contain secrets and minor may be influenced to share those secrets by sharing the books. So he only has access to the books of accounts of the firm. Minor can also file a suit if he is not given his share of profit or property, but he can file a case. We will allow him only when he decides to sever his connections with the firm. Sever means he decides to leave the firm. What are his liabilities? See, he is not personally liable. Okay, he is not personally liable. He is only liable to the extent of his share in the profit and property. So there is liability. It is very wrong to say that he is not liable, he will not share the loss. Whatever is his share in the profit and property, to that extent he is liable. But he cannot be declared insolvent on declaration of the firm's insolvency. Obviously, he is not personally liable. His liabilities can never be more than assets. So you cannot declare him as an insolvent. What are his rights and liabilities on attaining majority? So as soon as he knows that he has been admitted for the benefits, when he gets knowledge, or as soon as he turns major, then within 6 months, whichever is later. Okay, so he either attains majority, or he came to know very late that he had been admitted for the benefits of the firm. Okay, he got knowledge that he had been admitted as a minor for the benefits of the firm, whichever is later. From that, you will get a time limit of 6 months. So within 6 months of attaining majority, or within 6 months of gaining knowledge that I had been admitted for the benefits of the firm, he has to give a public notice as to what is his decision now. Now that you have become a major, now that you know you were admitted as a minor partner, now you can decide whether you want to continue or not. Within 6 months, please give a public notice. So give a public notice of your decision whether you want to continue as a partner or not. So his rights and liabilities will be similar to that of a full-fledged partner if he decides he wants to continue. So nothing will change. Now your rights and liabilities will be that of a full-fledged partner. Earlier also you were liable, but now you will start being personally liable for all the debts that were contracted from the date he was admitted to the benefits of the firm. Share in the profit, property, everything will remain the same. But if he says, no, I don't want to be a partner, then his rights and liabilities will be that of a minor up to the date of public notice. His act will not be liable after the date of public notice. Now he can even file a case against the other partners because he has decided to leave the firm. Ma'am, what if he does not give a public notice within these 6 months? If he doesn't give a public notice, after 6 months, we will assume that he has agreed to become a partner. Okay, so many a time students tell me that, ma'am, why give a public notice? Because after 6 months, anyways, you will be assumed a partner. If you give a notice, then you will start enjoying the benefits of a full-fledged partner immediately after the notice. So that is why. Do we need to study the distinguish between? Yes, you need to study all the distinguish between that I have given in my textbook, because they are all very important for exam. I cannot single out a distinguish between. They are all important. Okay. So that was unit 1. It was a very quick but a very effective revision, because once we come to know what kind of questions will be asked on a particular topic, then studying it becomes very easy. Okay. So let us continue our discussion, and unit 2 talks about the relation of the partners. This is one very important unit. A lot of questions can be asked from this because it's a very vast unit. It covers many sections of the Partnership Act. Duties of partners. What kind of question can be asked? This is important only for a theory question, but point 6, okay, this can be asked as a case-based question. Section 16, this is also very important for exam. If a case-based question is asked, then you will have to mention section 16 also. So what are the duties? Duty to carry on the business to the greatest common advantage, to be just and faithful. Let us highlight the keywords. Carry on the business to the greatest common advantage, be just and faithful, act in utmost good faith, render proper and true accounts to his co-partners, provide full information of the things to indemnify if the loss is caused due to his fraud in the conduct of the business of the firm. So these are very basic points, very important, that you are not entitled to earn any personal profits. See, the relation of the partners is based on trust and confidence. You cannot try to earn personal profit at the cost of the firm. Okay, so law says that don't try to make any personal profit, and if you do, then please return that. Okay, you have to account for and pay it back to the firm. So if you're trying to earn personal profit, firstly, you should not, but if you do earn some profit, then please return it to the firm. No right to claim remuneration, obviously, because you cannot claim remuneration unless it is allowed by the deed. We say that partner, you're an adventurer, you are getting a share of profit. Why do you need anything over and above that? You're not an employee to earn salary. So, therefore, you do not have the right to claim remuneration. What are the mutual rights of the partners? So they have the right to take active part. Every partner has the right to take active part in the conduct of the business of the firm. You cannot restrict the rights of a partner. Okay, sometimes it is allowed, but every partner has the right to take active part in the conduct of the business of the firm. Every partner has the right to be consulted, but it is not always possible, no. So we say that in case of fundamental, means very important matters, you need the consent of all the partners. But in case of routine matters, administrative matters, consent of majority is also accepted. So if there is some routine matter, there is a difference of opinion, then the majority, their approval will prevail. You do not have any right to claim remuneration unless it is allowed by the deed. You all have access to the books of accounts, whether you're an active partner or a sleeping partner. You also have a right to share the profits either equally or as it is mentioned in the deed. Okay, so we have the right to share profits either in the ratio, or if nothing is given, then equally. Sharing of profit also includes sharing of losses, okay, in the same ratio unless they have something else. No, you cannot claim interest on capital unless it is allowed by the deed. Interest on advances you will get even if the deed is silent. That is the loan given by the partner to the firm. So you will get interest at the rate of 6% per annum if your deed is silent. Right to be indemnified, right to be compensated. If suppose you have incurred some expenses for the firm, you have the right to feel compensated, right to stop the admission. Admission requires the consent of all the partners. My consent was not taken. I have the right to stop admission of a partner. Right to retire. Yes, you can retire with the consent of all the partners, or if it is mentioned in the deed, by giving a notice. Now, this is generally consent of all partners. This is in case of particular partnership. By giving a notice is generally in case of partnership at will. You can highlight this. Or you can also retire in accordance with an express agreement between the partners that this person will retire after 2 years. We only need his services for 2 years. You cannot expel a partner. This is very important. We are going to study this later also. Section 33 we will study in detail later. Section 33, no partner can be expelled unless there is approval of the majority of the partners. It is in good faith for the benefit of the firm and the deed allows it. This is very, very important for exam. Along with section number, can be asked as a theory question. It is generally asked as theory only. Okay, and outgoing partner, all right, outgoing partner cannot carry on competing business unless he agrees to not to use the firm's name. Now, a person has retired, he wants to start a competing business, so we are saying, oh, okay, we will allow you, you can also use the firm's name, but you have to make 3 promises. You will not use the firm's name, you will not represent yourself to be carrying on the business of the firm, you will not solicit, you will not attract our customers. If you make these 3 promises, then we will allow you to do a competing business, competing with that of the firm. You cannot use the firm's name, you will not represent yourself to be a partner, and you cannot solicit, you cannot attract our customers. Right of an outgoing partner to share subsequent profits. Again, this is also very important for exam. If the partner has retired or he dies, his account needs to be settled. So you either give him his share of profit on whatever amount is remaining, whatever is attributable to that, or you give him interest at the rate of 6% per annum. Okay, so share profits since the day he ceased to be a partner, or give him interest on the share in the property of the firm. So this is also very important. Both are generally asked together. So in one question, they will ask you to mention provisions of section 36 as well as 37. Now, what is the meaning of partnership property? Very interesting and very important for exam. What is the meaning of partnership property? This is generally asked as a case-based question, but if it is asked as a case-based question, they want you to write the theory also. Okay, what is partnership property? Anything which the partner has brought to the firm as his capital contribution, Okay, so let's say he got some stock, then he got a car, he got some money. So whatever the partners have brought in as their contribution to the firm, whatever the firm has purchased, okay, whatever the firm has purchased, like the firm purchased a land, firm purchased a building, firm purchased some stock. So all this is partnership property. Okay, all this belongs to the firm. Also, goodwill is partnership property because goodwill can be bought, goodwill can be sold just like any other asset. Yes. So all this will constitute partnership property. Now, how will I know that this is partnership property? So check in the question. Who is giving the money? What is their intention? Okay. Check these two things. What is their intention? And who is giving money? Because the person who gives money, property belongs to that person. So if the firm is giving money, it's the firm's property. If the partner is giving money, it's the partnership property. But intention also matters. Now, let's say that XYZ, they are three partners. They are for the time being using the shop of Z. Okay, his shop is being used as an office. It's just temporary. So then in this case, even though the firm is using this shop, this actually is still partner's property only. But what if Z says, I have no use of this shop? Let us use this as an office permanently. Then that office will become partnership property. So see the intention. So if they are using this shop as office, but only temporarily, then this will remain partner's property. But if they are using this shop as an office permanently, then this property, okay, this property will now become firm's property because you have given it to the firm. So see the intention and see who is giving money. If the firm is paying, name does not matter. Even if we buy it in the name of the partner, doesn't matter. Who is paying the money? Firm is paying the money. It is firm's property. Okay. So if the partner is paying money, it is partner's property. But intention also matters. Partnership property not very frequently asked in the exam, but can be asked. Relation of partners to the third person. Now, we enjoy mutual agency. Yes. So, relation of partners is governed by mutual agency. A, B, C, D, E, they are partners. A and B, they issue a promissory note promising to pay certain money to C, one of the partners. My question is, are D and E also liable? Now, this relation of partners governed by mutual agency applies only for the contracts with third party outsiders. This mutual agency is not applicable for the promises made between the partners themselves. So the relation of the partners to third person is governed by mutual agency. What does mutual agency mean? That a partner is principal as well as agent. So if X has entered into a contract, it can bind Y and Z also. So he has the capacity to bind the other partners. He is acting as agent, but he is also liable for the acts of Z. If Z is entering into contract with a third person and he does not pay, X and Y will be liable. So he is liable for the act of other partners. He is acting as their principal. So a partner may sometimes act as agent, sometimes as principal. This is nothing but mutual agency. But this mutual agency only applies for the transactions with some third party. For the promises made among the partners themselves, okay, this relation is not applicable. So if A and B are promising to pay some money to C, then D and E are not responsible if A and B fail to pay money. C cannot recover it from D and E. So the relation of mutual agency, it cannot be applied to all the transactions and dealings between the partners themselves. Implied authority, extremely important for exam. Mostly it will be asked as a 4 to 5 mark question, theory, case based, anything can be asked. Okay, so you need to know this properly. Implied authority. Now, what is the meaning of authority? Authority means capacity of a partner to bind the firm by his acts. Okay, so it is the capacity of a partner to bind the firm by his acts. So X, Y, and Z, they are in a business of stationery. Z buys some stationery goods to be sold by the firm. Are the other partners also liable to pay for this to the third party? Law says yes. You cannot say Z bought, so only Z is liable. Sorry, he's one of you only, no, he's your partner. Because of mutual agency, he can bind the other partners. So this is nothing but implied authority. As a partner, you have the authority to carry out a lot of acts. You can do a lot of things. So as a partner, you are entitled to enter into certain contracts and bind the other partners. You have an implied authority. So what are the acts which are within implied authority? That is important for example. There are two lists. Both are important. The first is acts within the implied authority, and second is the acts which a partner is not authorized to do. There is some statutory restriction. Both these lists are very important for exam. Okay, now what are the acts which are within the implied authority? As a partner, you have the right to do these things. No one can stop you. You can buy the goods which are generally used by the firm. If you can buy the goods, automatically you are also given the authority to sell the goods. It's understood, no? If someone is authorized to buy, that person is also authorized to sell. You need not ask the other partners. You can do it on your own. If you have purchased the goods, then you will have to make payments and settle the accounts. So you also have the right to settle the accounts. If you are selling the goods, you will obviously receive money. You can accept the money and issue receipts. So these 4 points are connected. As a partner, you also have the authority to engage servants, appoint employees, engage a lawyer to defend a suit, to borrow money, to pledge movable property and obtain loan, to draw, accept, endorse bill of exchange and other negotiable instrument. As a partner, you have the authority to do these things. No one can stop you. Now, X, Y, and Z, they are three partners. Z purchased the goods which are generally used by the firm. If he is entering into contract with a third party, then X and Y, they are also equally liable to pay for the goods. So if Z has purchased goods for the firm in the firm's name with the intention to bind the firm, then if he is not paying, X and Y, the other partners will have to pay because this is an act binding on the firm. What are the acts which are restricted? Now, the restriction may be either mutually imposed or it may be a statutory restriction. Mutually imposed meaning we have mutually agreed to be bound by those restrictions. Okay, they are by mutual agreement, and then there are certain statutory restrictions which are imposed by law, section 19. So you're not authorized to do these acts. Like a single partner cannot submit a dispute to arbitration relating to the business of the firm. You cannot on your own decide to go for out of court settlement. Arbitration means out of court settlement. You cannot open a bank account on behalf of the firm in the partner's own name. The account should be opened in the firm's name. You cannot compromise or give up, relinquish, or claim by the firm. You cannot tell the customer, Acha, don't pay. You cannot withdraw a suit proceedings filed on behalf of the firm. You cannot admit a liability. You cannot acquire, transfer immovable property, or enter into partnership. You cannot do that unless you consult the other partners also. The firm is not liable to the third party because third party, you should have known these restrictions. They are statutory. They are present in law. You cannot say, I don't know the law of my own country. You're expected to know about this. The firm is not liable. But what if it is imposed by mutual agreement? Like X, Y, Z, they are partners. They all have the right to borrow money that is given by the law. But we have put some restriction on Z because he borrows a lot of money. So we tell him that you cannot borrow more than 30,000. Now this restriction has been mutually imposed. The third party is not aware of this restriction. What if the third party lent 50,000 rupees to Z thinking that he has the power to borrow? Firm will be liable. But if the firm had specifically told the third party that, listen, we have imposed a restriction on the partner, don't give him more than 30,000 rupees. If the third party has knowledge of the restriction, then we will be liable only for 30,000. The remaining 20,000, you can recover it from the partner himself. Okay, so if the third party had knowledge of the restriction, then the firm is liable only for 30,000. But if the third party had no knowledge of this mutually agreed restriction, then in this case, the firm will be liable for the entire 50,000 because he was not aware. No, we didn't tell him about the restriction. So this is very important again for exam, that is mutual agreement. I have explained all this later in the notes. I'm just discussing the example so that it is easy for us to recall. Okay, so that was about implied authority. Please learn these two lists. They are very, very, very important for exam. Theory, case based, any kind of question can be asked. All right, everyone, let us continue our discussion. So up till now, we have covered everything till the implied authority of a partner. So we started our discussion with what is a partnership, what are the different kinds of partners, what are the essential features of partnership. And in mutual rights, we discussed what are the rights and duties of a partner, what are the mutual rights of a partner, what are the duties of a partner. And we discussed something about partnership property. Okay. Then let us now continue with the remaining sections. Acts of partner in case of emergency, section 21. So every partner can bind the other partners by acts in case of emergency. So let's say, for example, that XYZ, they are partners and they agree that none of us will sell the goods more than 2 lakh without the consultation of the other partners. But suddenly there was a slump in the market. Prices were falling rapidly. Z was alone in office. He tried to contact X and Y, but they were not reachable. So he decided to sell the goods at the best available price. Now, let's say, for example, that the goods were valued at 5 lakh rupees. Now, they had decided that they will not sell the goods without consulting each other. But there was an emergency situation, the prices were falling rapidly. So he did this to protect the interest of the firm, and any person in his place would have done the same. So he acted like a prudent man. Anyone under his situation, similar situation, would have acted in the same manner. So in this case, the act is binding and it is valid. It is binding on the firm. But these are the two conditions to be satisfied: that he acted to protect the interest of the firm, and anyone in his position would have acted in the same manner. Then, yes, in this case, the sale is valid. Okay, the sale is valid. Notice to acting partner, section 24. The word acting over here means active partner. Notice means anything told to the active partner is like it is told to the others, because we assume that they communicate on daily basis. So if I tell something to an active partner, we assume that others also know about it. There is an assumption that they communicate on daily basis. The only exception would lie in case of fraud. In case of fraud, notice to one partner is not notice to the others. The person who is involved in fraud, he shall be liable. This is very important for theory. Liability towards the third party. Write down, this is important for a theory question. See, we know that the liability is joint, several, and unlimited. Every partner is liable to the others for the act of the firm. What is the meaning of act of the firm? Now, if one partner does something, okay, A, B, C are three partners. If C is buying goods, others are also liable. There is mutual agency. So if C is buying goods, others are also liable to pay. If the firm is accused of infringing a trademark, then others are also liable. So in this case, A, B, C, they are accused of infringing a trademark. Now, infringement means they are copying the trademark, they are using the trademark of some other person. So a case was filed against the partnership firm. Okay, a case was filed against them. Now the judgment arose after the firm was dissolved. Okay, so the case was filed while they were partners, but the judgment, the damages, they arose after the dissolution of the firm. My question is, are the partners liable? Law says yes, because when the infringement took place, that time they were partners. So this is considered as act of the firm. All the partners are liable because the act was done while they were partners. Damages arose later on, that is not our concern. But the act was done while they were partners, so they are all liable. Then we have responsibility for tort or wrongful act. The meaning of tort is wrongful act. So the firm is liable to the same extent as that of the partner for any loss or injury caused to the third party by the wrongful act of the partner. It is as if the act was done by the partner himself. Now, what does it mean? See, XYZ, they are partners. They have made X as an editor. They were the owners of a publication. So they have made X as an editor. He decides what is to be published, when it is to be published, etc. Once X decided to publish a defamatory statement against a very important person. Now this person filed case against the company, against the partner and the firm. Now the defamatory statement was published by X. Are Y and Z also liable? Law says yes. Each partner is liable for the wrongful act of the partner if it is done in the ordinary course of business and with the authority of the other partners. We had only authorized him to act as an editor, and publishing an article is in the ordinary course of business. So, yes, X was authorized to be an editor with the consent of Y and Z, and he has made some wrongful act in some ordinary course of business. They were into publication, and that is what he had done. So, yes, although the defamatory statement was made by X, Y and Z are also liable. Liability of the firm for misapplication by the partner. Now, in the first scenario, partner receives money or any property from the third person, and the same partner who has received it misapplies it. Okay, the partner receives money or property from a third person, and that same partner misapplies it. The firm is liable. See, we are all governed by mutual agency. Firm is liable. The firm receives money or property. Earlier, the partner had received it. Now, the firm received money or property from a third person, but it is misapplied by one of the partners. So earlier, partner received the property, partner misapplied it, firm is liable. In the second case, firm receives the money, but it is misapplied by the partner. In both the cases, firm is liable. Rights of transferee, very, very important for case-based question. But the framing is like a case-based question. They are actually expecting you to write the theory only. A, B, C, they are partners. C transferred 20% of his interest in the partnership to Q. Now see, when you transfer with the consent of the parties, with the consent of the other partner, now if C is transferring with the consent of A and B, then I don't think they will object. But what if C is transferring without the consent of A and B? Now the transfer is already made, we can't help it. But A and B don't like this new person Q. See, if C has transferred 20% of his holding to Q, so now Q has become our partner, we cannot help it. But we don't like him, we don't want him as a partner. But we cannot do anything about it. So what we do is we tell him that, listen, transferee Q, you are not entitled to interfere in the conduct of the business of the firm. Don't interfere. You cannot go through our accounts. You cannot inspect the books. You are only entitled to accept the profits as we agree by the partners. Whatever profits we agree, we will give it to you. But you cannot interfere in the conduct of the business of the firm. You cannot go through the books of accounts. When the firm is dissolved or when your transferring partner, okay, transferor, he retires, then you can go through the books of accounts to determine whether your share has been properly calculated for settlement or not. Other than that, we will not allow you to exercise any rights. We don't want you, we don't like you, you have not been admitted with our consent. So nothing doing. Okay, so we will not allow you, we will not give you any right. Only when the firm is dissolved or when your retiring partner, when your transferring partner retires, that time we will give you permission to go to the books of accounts. Otherwise, nothing. We will not get any right. So this is because we are transferring without the consent. Even with the consent, certain restrictions can be imposed. Next, we have admission of a partner. Admission requires the consent of all the partners, or sometimes it may be in accordance with the contract. Like partners have agreed that in case any partner dies and if his son is a major person, then automatically he will become the partner. So sometimes it is by agreement. Nothing is mentioned in the agreement, ma'am. Then in that case, you can admit a partner only with the consent of all the partners. This is because if you are admitting a new partner, the others will sacrifice. But a doubt was asked that, ma'am, if one partner is not sacrificing anything, still we need the consent. Yes, because partnership is the relation of mutual trust, confidence. I don't want to work with anyone whom I don't trust, whom I don't know. See, partnership is very different from a company form of business. What happens in a company? In case of a company, the members, they own the business, but it is managed by the board of directors. So we are not concerned about the who owns the company and who manages. But partnership is very unique. In a partnership business, the owners are also the people who manage the business. So I should be very comfortable with the other owners, no? Because we are all going to do business together. See, in company, I'm not concerned who is admitted as a member, who buys the shares, because these members don't meet each other. They are not involved in the management. So we are not concerned with who is the owner. But here we are concerned with who is admitted as a partner because we have to work together. In partnership, ownership and management is in the hands of the same persons. So even if I'm not sacrificing my share, okay, sometimes I'm not sacrificing anything, but still my consent is required because I will be working with that new partner. So I have to be comfortable with him. My consent is required before you admit him as a partner. He will be liable only for the acts done after his admission. He is not responsible for anything done before admission unless he agrees to be liable. Retirement section 32. A person can retire with the consent of all the partners if it's a particular partnership. If it is at will, then you can just give a notice and retire. Sometimes it is by an agreement that person will be a partner only for 2 years. After 2 years, he will retire. So if it is a particular partnership, then the retirement will be with the consent of all the partners. If it is a particular partnership, it is, sorry, if it is a particular partnership, it is the consent of all the partners. If it is partnership at will, then it is with a notice of your intention. Just give 14 days notice and you can retire. Sometimes it is by an express agreement that he will be admitted for 2 years. After 2 years, he will retire. Now, if a partner is retiring, public notice is compulsory. Yes, public notice is compulsory. The retiring partner will continue to remain liable till the date of public notice. So retiring partner has to give a public notice, or firm can give a public notice, but giving public notice is compulsory. If the third party is entering into contract without knowing that this partner has retired because no public notice was given, then he will continue to remain liable for all the acts done till the date of public notice. Expulsion of partner, section 33, very, 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 very important for exam. Why? Case-based question is asked, but you're expected to write all the theory only. So please write learn. Very nice example is given over here. See this. X, Y, Z, they are partners. The wives of X and Y, they fought in the ladies' club, and the wife of X was very badly hurt. Okay. So X along with Z decides to expel Y. Is this expulsion valid? Act says no. Why? because this is not in good faith. Wives are fighting in the ladies' club and you are removing the husband from the partnership. This is not a valid reason for expulsion. For valid expulsion, it must be in good faith. The power to expel must be given in the agreement. And you also need to give a notice to the partner that you're expelling him. Otherwise, expulsion is not valid. And yes, you also need the approval of majority. It is not approval of all because the one who's being expelled will not give his approval. So, with the approval of majority. Good faith is also defined over here. So, when is the expulsion valid? Expulsion is valid if the power is it is available in the agreement, that is partnership deed. So your deed should allow expulsion. The deed should allow you to expel any partner. The expulsion must be exercised by majority and it must be in good faith. Now, what is good faith? Good faith means the expulsion must be in the interest of the partnership. The person who is being expelled must be served with a notice and he must be given an opportunity of being heard. If it is not in good faith, then the expulsion is null and void. That partner will have to be reinstated. You will have to again appoint him as a partner. So please learn this, it is important for exam. Insolvency of a partner. You cannot just declare yourself to be insolvent. You need to apply to the court. The court will judge you as an insolvent. So you cease to be a partner from the date of adjudication. Your estate will be liable for the acts of the firm done before adjudication. After the order is passed, your estate is not liable. Even the firm is not liable for your acts. Neither are you liable for acts of the firm. So a person ceases, he stops being a partner from the date of adjudication. Adjudication means the date when he is adjudged as an insolvent. Unless agreed otherwise, firm is dissolved. So by default, firm is dissolved. Otherwise, you can mention in the agreement that the firm will not be dissolved. So we will follow that. Sometimes you mention in the agreement that the firm is not dissolved. So we will follow that. Otherwise, by default, the firm is dissolved. Estate is not liable for the acts done after the date of the order, and his estate is not liable for the acts done after the date, and the firm is also not liable for his acts. Okay, so the insolvent partner, he is not liable for acts of the firm done after the date of order. Firm is also not liable for his acts done after the date of order. Death, yes. By death, by default, death results in insolvency of the firm unless you agree that the firm is not dissolved. Here also we follow the same logic. Let's say X died. His estate will be liable for all the transactions of the firm done before the death. But his estate will not be liable for the acts done after his death. His estate means his share in the property of the firm. Public notice is also not required in case of death of a partner. Ma'am, why is public notice not required? Death itself is public notice. Insolvency and death do not require public notice because everybody knows about it. When a person dies, everybody knows that he has died. When a person is declared insolvent, it doesn't look good that you announce to everyone, "Hey, this person is insolvent. Firm is not liable for his acts. He's not liable for the acts of the firm." You need not tell all that. Death itself is public notice because once a person dies, we inform everyone. So everybody comes to know about it. So that itself is a public notice that he is no longer a partner. This is one very good example. XYZ, they had ordered goods during X's lifetime. The order was placed, but the goods were received after he died. Law says only an order was placed. This is not a financial transaction. It's not a financial transaction. So there is no entry in the books. Therefore, the firm is not liable. Firm is not liable. And he is also not. Firm is not liable. That deceased partner's profit, share, and property is not liable. Firm is liable to pay. But his share in the profit and property is not liable because only an order was placed during his lifetime. Goods were delivered after his death. That placing of order is not even a financial transaction. There's no entry in the books. So his estate is not liable for this. So that finishes your unit 2. Let us now discuss one very important unit, that is registration and dissolution of partnership firm. Now, the part on registration is very, very, very important for theory question. 99% theory question will be asked. Is registration compulsory? No, as per the act, it is not. It is compulsory in Maharashtra because the state government requires it. Registration means it's very simple, getting your firm registered with the registrar of firms of the area where your registered office is situated. So I am in Mumbai. So I will go to the registrar of firms having jurisdiction in Mumbai. If you are in Tamil Nadu, you will go to the registrar having jurisdiction where your registered office is situated in Tamil Nadu. So it's a very simple process and everything is online only. Registration means getting the partnership firm registered with the registrar of firms of the area where the place of business is either situated or proposed to be situated. Wherever you are going to have your office, get your firm registered with that ROF. According to the Act, it is not compulsory. Registration is not compulsory. There's no penalty on non-registration. There are only certain disabilities which make registration desirable. What are those? Okay. What are the consequences of non-registration? Very important, along with section number, section 69. See, registration is not compulsory. There's no penalty imposed on non-registration. But there are certain disabilities which make the registration desirable. Firm cannot file a case against the outsiders. But outsiders can file case against the firm. Firm cannot file case against the partner. Partner cannot file case against the firm. Okay. So no suit by the partner against the firm. If a partner is not given his share in the profit property, that unregistered firm's partner cannot sue the other partners or the firm. But yes, this does not apply to criminal acts. If you find that one partner is stealing money from the business, you can file a case against that partner. It's a criminal act. Even if your firm is unregistered, you can file a case. But other than that, if you are not given your share in the profit, if you are not allowed to participate in the business, in the conduct of the business, then you cannot file a case against the firm because it is unregistered. Better to get the firm registered. We cannot file case against a third party, but third party can file case against us. But this disability can be removed by getting the firm registered before filing the suit. So you first get yourself registered, then you file a case. But what if I get myself registered later on? No, that is not going to help you. If you get your firm registered after filing the case. Law says it's of no use because at the time of filing the case, you were unregistered. So no benefit will be given. No right to claim set off in excess of rupees 100. Now the firm has to pay 10,000 to X, but they also have to receive 1,000 rupees from him. It is best that the firm pays 9,000. But this kind of set off will not be available if you are unregistered. What if the firm has to pay 10,000 but it has to recover 90 rupees? Then set off is available because the amount to be set off is less than 100. Ma'am, then it is of no use, no? Get your firm registered. Now, what if the firm has to pay 1 crore and it has to recover 80 lakhs? If it is registered, then you need to make arrangement of only 20 lakhs. Because you have to pay 1 crore but also receive 80 lakhs. No? If you are registered, you need to make arrangement of just 20 lakhs. But if you are unregistered, you will have to pay 1 crore without getting any set off because it is in excess of 100 rupees. So you have to pay 1 crore. So you have to make arrangement of 1 crore. The best part is, if I don't pay 1 crore, third party can file a case against the firm. But if the third party is not paying 80 lakhs, I cannot file a case and recover because I am unregistered. Better to get the firm registered. So if I am unregistered, I will have to pay 1 crore. I will have to make arrangement of 1 crore. Better to get the firm registered because then I will have to make arrangement of only the difference, that is 20 lakhs. I'll get set off. But if you are unregistered, you will not get any set off. This is also very important for theory. Okay, this is also very, very important for theory. Three to 4 marks question can be asked. Even if I am unregistered, these rights are not affected. What are those? Third party can file the case against the firm. Third party can file, right? I cannot sue the third party. They can file a case against me. The partners can sue for dissolution of the firm, settlement of accounts, realizing the property. It means selling the property. Of a dissolved firm. All that is not affected by, all that will not get affected by non-registration. Power of the official receiver, assignee, to realize the property of insolvent partner. Realize means sell. You prepare a realization account in case of dissolution. That is nothing but an account which is used to record all the sales. I sold the assets, I got money, that I will use it to pay off the liabilities at the time of dissolution. I can claim set off if the amount does not exceed 100 rupees. So non-registration will not affect these rights. What is the meaning of dissolution of the firm and dissolution of the partnership? Dissolution of firm versus dissolution of the partnership. See, this is just dissolution of the relation between the partners. But here the business only comes to an end. Partnership means only the relation between the partners is affected, maybe at the time of admission, retirement, death. So earlier A, B, C were partners, now C died, so only A and B remain the partners. That is dissolution of the partnership. But what if they want to end the business? They want to wind up the business. They will sell the assets, pay off the liabilities. So this is discontinuation of the business itself. Here only there is change in the constitution of the firm. Only the partners have changed, the relation has changed. Firm may be dissolved by the order of the court, but dissolution of partnership is not by the order of the court. Dissolution of the firm very much involves dissolution of the partnership relation, but here dissolution of the partnership may not involve dissolution of the firm. Sometimes there is only change in the relation of the partners, firm's business continues. Here there is no final closure of the books. Here books are closed because you need to sell the assets, pay off the liability, there is settlement of account. Now dissolution may be either voluntarily or with the order of the court. So sometimes you don't need the order of the court. Like mutually you can decide. This generally happens in case of particular partnership. And you can just give a notice and dissolve the firm in case of partnership at will. Sometimes your business becomes unlawful to be carried out. That time you have to be compulsorily dissolved. All the partners become insolvent. All but one has become insolvent. Compulsory dissolution. On happening of contingencies like war, death, insolvency, these are all reasons for dissolution of the firm. But it's not always that you can mutually dissolve the firm. Sometimes any one partner can go to the court. The partner can prove that dissolution is necessary and the court will order dissolution. So any partner can go. It may be due to insanity of the partner. I am able to prove that without this person, we cannot do business. If he has become insane, we cannot do business. Please settle the accounts. Give money to his family. We cannot do business. So it makes no point. So dissolve the firm. Partner has become permanently incapable. Partner commits some misconduct. Like he has anger management problem, he hits people, he is an alcoholic, he misbehaves in corporate parties and affects the goodwill of the firm. That is a ground. He is constantly breaching the contracts. He has committed some kind of a fraud. And that's not his first time. The firm is incurring perpetual losses. Now the firm is in business since 10 years. Since 10 years, we have only incurred loss. Even if we continue, we will only incur loss. It is better to dissolve the firm. Transfer of the whole of interest, 100%. Whole means 100%. Like A, B, C, they are partners. C transferred whole means 100% of his interest to Q. We don't want Q as a full-fledged partner. Dissolve the firm. Any partner can go. Any other just and equitable ground. Partner is gambling on the stock market. Partner has they are quarreling. Partners always quarrel. They are not able to arrive at a decision. They are not on talking terms. These are all grounds for dissolution. So that was order of the court. Now that we have decided to dissolve the firm, we need to settle the accounts. Yes. Now that we have decided to dissolve the firm, we need to settle the accounts. So from where will we get money? First, use the profits that we have earned from the sale of assets. When that is over, use the capital. And lastly, you can ask the partners to contribute individually in their profit sharing ratio. So this is the source of money. This is from where you will get money. How will we utilize it? Who will be paid first? So first you will pay the third party outsiders. Then you will pay the loans, advances. Then you will pay capital. Lastly, it will be divided among the partners in their profit sharing ratio. So first pay the outsiders, then pay partners loan, then you pay the capital, because for loan, partner is treated just like an outsider. So first pay outsider, then pay partners loan, then you pay the partners capital, and lastly, if there is any surplus, it will be distributed. This is very nice. Firm's debt and partner's debt. See, firm's asset will be first used to pay off the firm's debts, whatever is surplus that is distributed. Partner's private debts. Okay, now, so partner's private assets will be used to first pay off their private debts. Then whatever is remaining, he will bring it in the business. Never assume that partner's liability is unlimited. Partner's liability is unlimited. It means that he will leave his personal debts and first give everything to the firm. No. Partner's private property will be first used to pay off his private debts. Then whatever is the surplus, it will be applied for the payment of the firm's liability if they exceed the assets. Very important for exam, public notice. Very important. Public notice means giving notice in the newspaper. Okay, in the newspaper. One English, one vernacular. And also informing the registrar of firms. I will highlight it for you. Okay, first let us see when is the public notice required to be given. Public notice is required in case of retirement, expulsion, dissolution, minor partner's decision. If they don't give public notice, they will continue to remain liable till the public notice is given. But it is not required in case of death, insolvency of a partner, or retirement of a sleeping or dormant partner. See, death itself is notice. Insolvency itself is notice. Sleeping or dormant, nobody even knows that he is a partner, so his retirement should not affect us. If your firm is unregistered, public notice will be given by publishing in the official gazette. This is the official booklet for public announcement by the government. In at least one vernacular newspaper circulating in the place, district where the firm has the principal place of business. But if you are also registered, if you are a registered firm, of course, yes, we will give notice in the official gazette. We will give notice in the newspaper. But one notice will also be given to the registrar of firms, ROF. Okay, so theory question is generally asked on public notice. Garner versus Murray is not important. It is not going to be asked in the exam. All right. So yes, what is important is settlement of accounts, public notice, dissolution by the order of the court, without the order of the court. That is very important for exam. Okay. There are few small provisions also, which I don't think will be asked, but let's go through them. Liability of the partner on dissolution. See, you will continue to remain liable as a partner for the acts done by the firm after dissolution. Like, I want to clear the pending bills, for sale of asset, for repayment of loans. For all this, the firm still exists even though it is dissolved. Like A and B, they are two partners. B died. The firm has to be dissolved because alone A cannot do partnership business. So the firm is dissolved. And nothing was mentioned in the agreement also. So in this case, you will be responsible like a partner for all the acts even after dissolution. Also, this is in case of death, but let us consider one more situation of retirement. C retired. So we need to give public notice. If public notice is not given, then he will continue to remain liable as if he never retired until the public notice is given. Even in case of dissolution, you need to give a public notice. Let's say A, B and C, they are partners. Okay, A, B, C, they are partners. They have decided to dissolve. So you give public notice. if you don't give public notice, we will consider as if you all are still partners. Okay. So until public notice is given, partners, they continue to be liable for acts as if the dissolution never happened. So XYZ, they dissolved the firm, but they did not give notice. Z borrowed money before the public notice was given. Firm is liable. But the estate of a deceased partner, insolvent, sleeping or dormant, who has retired, they are not liable because for them public notice is not required. So deceased partner, insolvent partner, sleeping or dormant partner who has retired, for them public notice is not required. So they will not be liable even if the public notice is not given for dissolution. Okay. So guys, we have now finished the revision of all the 3 units of partnership. Please note that this particular act is important because you can expect questions of 10 to 15 marks from this particular act. Minimum 10 to 15 marks question will be asked. So it is very, very important that you study this act, and it is a very simple one. Sale of Goods Act is also important because Sale of Goods Act, Partnership Act, Companies Act, they all have equal weightage. So don't leave this particular act in option. It's simple. You have already studied this in accounts and maybe OC or something like that. There is not much content to write. So you have to be very specific about what you are writing in the answer. If you see my notes, 2-3 bullet points, that's it. So not many, it's not a very deep concept like Companies Act wherein you have 6 to 7 points to write, or Contract Act where you can write 4 to 5 things in the provisions. So the questions which are going to be asked in the exam will be of low weightage, 3 to 4 marks questions, totaling to 10 to 15. I don't think a 6 to 7 mark question will be asked. If it is asked, it may be either on difference between or what are the essential elements of partnership. But even then, they have not asked many questions on the essential elements. They have said list all the essential elements, explain any 2. So the weightage will be 3 to 4 marks, but overall it is an important act. Okay. So please study this act properly. Also, if you have liked this revision, do share it with your friends. You can purchase the full course by visiting my website capreetyagarwal.com. I will come up with more such one-shot marathon revision lectures. Till then, take care and keep studying.